All right, so I want to talk to Rodney in Michigan. What do you want to talk about, Rodney?
Hi, how are you guys doing? Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to first find out what the show is actually about. I found it a couple months ago.
The Experience of Atheists.
Is this actually
Yeah, it's a show.
Is this actually a show that's looking for someone to prove God, or is it just an atheist show?
No,
I mean, we'd love it if you could.
Yeah.
People have tried. If you can today, let's do it. I might recommend you to check out who you're calling before you call, but you're here now. We're glad to hear from you. What do you got for us?
Well, I've been a Christian all my life. I'm 53 now. I was a Christian since 15. And, I mean, I believe that if you do believe the Bible, Jesus did say that those that would be looking for a sign will never find a sign. So I think people that look for signs are people that are never going to get signs. The Christian faith is a faith-based religion like every other religion. So it's something accepted by faith. But I do believe that there is enough evidence to prove the afterlife. And two of the things that I bring out is to people, and I have dealt with atheists before, is first of all the paranormal, but specifically in the area of near-death experiences, because I've studied near-death experiences for years, and they date back clear into the 1960s, 70s. There's thousands and thousands of near-death experiences, and for all tens of thousands of near-death experiences, there's very, very similar things that are involved in it. So I doubt very seriously.
Let me check in, Rodney, because I hear you calling to say that you believe in, the Christian God. That's your belief. You also say that you believe that it's possible to evidence that Christian God. Where's the evidence? Is what you're submitting here that because near-death experiences exist, God must also be a thing? Is that kind of where we're starting from here?
Not really, no.
Okay. What is the, setting aside your beliefs, what is the evidence that you have that supports the notion that believing in God is a reasonable, rational thing to do?
I believe because of Jesus.
Okay.
Right.
And
so that's a belief.
I believe because of him and his life, and I do believe there's enough historical evidence to say that, for people to say that Jesus never existed is just purely absurd.
So you believe that it makes sense to believe in God because there is supernatural evidence, or because there's these near-death experiences, or because there's this historical evidence?
No.
What is a piece of evidence that we can look at?
I believe that there's enough evidence to believe in the Christian God because of Jesus, but I do believe there's enough evidence to believe in an afterlife or a spiritual dimension because of not only, I'm not going to get into paranormal because I've had friends that have personally experienced it. I won't get into that, but I'm particularly thinking of near-death experiences.
Okay, so
which I have had friends personally involved with and tell me.
How did you eliminate?
Which they have no ulterior motive or anything like that.
You don't have to have
many thousands of them.
Well, so how did you eliminate a purely natural cause for NDEs?
Purely natural cause?
Yeah, how did you eliminate a purely natural cause?
I don't doubt that some people that have had near-death experiences weren't, quote-unquote, dead to be able to experience a near-death experience. That's why I believe in the variety of them. Some people were probably close to death,
but that's
maybe nearly dead, but
that's not really an answer to the question, right? Because we could spend quite a bit of time talking about exactly what death is. Medical, they have a definition, but people can't come back from that under the right conditions. So if they're super cold, things like that. What I'm asking specifically is, how did you eliminate natural causes, what you're claiming is a supernatural event?
Because of the events described that happen after they clinically have died, ruling out natural effect because they all say like 90% or more of them. And I've read and studied thousands and thousands of near-death, so I have a lot of knowledge in near-death experiences, and I've had friends experience.
But you understand that personal experience, even at that number, doesn't really mean anything to anybody, right? Because all it is a personal experience that we can't verify that experience in any way, shape, or form. And so what you need to do is to eliminate a natural cause. And given how much we don't know about biology and science and everything else around the world, I don't know how you eliminate a natural cause in a world where for the last 3,000 years at least we have been eliminating supernatural causes for almost everything in life. It just seems highly unlikely that everything from lightning to storms to disease have been shown to have natural causes when they were once thought supernatural. And all of a sudden, except for this one thing, NDEs, especially when we've done so much research, and in many cases, we can recreate some of those experiences through drugs. And so how did you eliminate the natural causes for anything given all of that? And is it possible to eliminate the natural causes?
Yes. You can eliminate the natural causes because like in 90% plus of near-death experiences, and like I said, I've read and studied thousands that date back from the 70s, 60s. I've had personal friends have it too. The fact that they all describe coming out of their body and floating and being able to see their body being worked on, and to describe things that there's no natural explanation how they could.
So again, how do you know there's no natural way?
And hear things.
Show me how there's no natural way for them to know these things.
How could it be natural for somebody to claim to have come out of their body and go into other rooms of the hospital
hallucinations and
hear? No.
Yeah.
You're kidding yourself with that. You can't have an hallucination that gives facts about what people said in other rooms. That's not a hallucination.
So if we have documented facts, that's a different thing, right? So that would be an answer to Jim's question. If you could give one example of like a very believable, certifiable example of somebody was in this room and they learned information from this other room, we can start to talk about that. But in each and every case, as you start to pull the threads,
we have that.
I hear you saying that you have that, but I asked you so many times to call in with just one piece of evidence, and you're talking in vague generalities. And so I'm going to talk in vague generalities and point out that for each of those vague generalities, as we start to pull the threads one by one, we start to see, well, maybe not everybody's lying. Maybe some people are being honest, but maybe they heard this in a different situation. Maybe they remembered it differently. I mean, consciousness is a very unreliable thing. Your brain is not a hard drive hooked up to a tape recorder and camcorder. The things that you think that you know should really be questioned. And if you want to talk about a specific example, we could maybe look at that particular example. It's hard to do in this format, I get it. But I really want to stress that these thousands of examples that supposedly exist out there just don't. If there was one, we wouldn't be talking about it on YouTube. It would be front page news.
There's many, hundreds of thousands of examples of this, where people have gone out of their bodies, have went to different rooms, have went actually to the top of the hospital and seen things on the top floor, the top roof of the hospital that was verified.
And those are the claims.
These things are in the hundreds of thousands
of claims.
Right? And we have, and the problem, part of the problem is that
documented claims. If you go and research,
I completely agree. The documented claims, and here's kind of where I come from. The best you can say about a near-death experience is we don't know how it happened, right? Because once you show me how, so it's a phenomenon is either supernatural or natural, right? One of those two things. And if you're going to try and prove the negative, you have to eliminate all the natural, which you cannot do. Right, because there's so many different ways people can do stuff. And so if you could, though, then you could say it was supernatural, but you can't do that. So the thing you need to do is you need to prove that it is, in fact, supernatural. And because we don't, but there's no way for, how do you prove that anything is supernatural? How do you eliminate somebody who overheard somebody describe what's on top of a hospital and then hallucinate that they floated up to that hospital and hallucinated the details? How do you eliminate that, given that a lot of times these patients are on drugs? They're on drugs that are slightly mind-altering, right? How do you eliminate all that? And don't give me tens of thousands, because the number doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, it does matter, because the more insurmountable evidence you have on something, the more
it's not insurmountable.
I mean, that's
the problem. It's not insurmountable. What you have is,
study it. It is insurmountable. When you really study it, you really look at them all.
Yeah, and I have, really and like I said, the best
accounts.
The best steel manning for your argument that I can give you is that we have phenomena we don't understand, and none of that proves it's supernatural, because you have to prove the supernatural exists first, and you can't do that. We haven't been able to do that. Every time somebody has tried, they have failed. I just did. No, you didn't. You haven't proved it. All you've done was restated a bunch of claims that I have already said. The best I can give you is we have phenomena that are not understood. That is the best you can do. That's not proof. That's just, hey, we got a lot of stuff that we don't know. And yeah, it is interesting that some of this stuff happens and we don't know how it happens. But until we can conduct experiments and we can start eliminating variables, we don't know anything. And given the nature of the experience, it's really hard to do that. And that's not my problem. That's a you problem. That's your problem. You've got to figure out a way, or the people yes, because you got to figure out a way to eliminate all the possible variables to just one and figure out what the mechanism is. Because it doesn't happen every time, right? It doesn't happen every time somebody has, not everybody who dies and comes back has a near-death experience. Some of them experience nothing. How do you explain that?
Like I just told you, some people don't actually get to the point where their soul leaves their body. Like there's,
well, how do you know that? If they're pronounced dead and then somehow they come back, then how do you know their soul didn't leave their body? How do you know there's a soul?
How do I know there's a soul? Because, like I told you, near-death experiences.
So again, we keep coming back to the same thing.
95.
You have no explanation.
Go ahead.
You have no explanation. You can't prove that there's a soul, right? Because we know how neurons work. And guess what? There's no place in the neural circuitry of the brain for a soul to plug into. Just none. So there's no place for a soul as far as we can tell. And so if you're going to say the soul leaves the body, you need to first prove there's a soul. You haven't done that. So you can't say the soul leaves the body and have us accept that, because you haven't proven it. And we can actually show that there's no room for a soul in the way we know the brains work so far, to our best understanding of science.
So the testimony of thousands and thousands of people are just considered nothing.
No, they're considered testimony of something we don't understand. And you're willing, see, here's part of the difference. I'm saying there's something here that I don't know and science can't explain, and I'm leaving it at that. You're going a step further. You're saying we don't know, therefore supernatural and God. You're taking a step further that you just can't, you can't take that step. Sometimes you have to stop with I don't know.
Because 90% of all near-death experiences will describe meeting God or angelic beings or past relatives.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like, even if I'm going to let you have that number and not push back on that statistic too hard, but it's also not terribly true, right? If we start looking at people in different cultures who grew up believing in a different God, if we start looking historically at people at various times, this notion that there is this like very American Christianity, pearly gates with somebody outside of it and cherubs and all these things that aren't even in the Bible is pretty ridiculous, because when we start looking cross-culturally, it just doesn't hold up.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. That means you haven't studied, because I have.
I'll take your word for it. I have not read 10,000s of near-death experiences, but I have asked a concrete series of questions, and I don't feel like we're getting any closer to an answer to any of those questions.
Yeah, and you restating there tens of thousands doesn't mean anything, because none of those have actually been an experiment. All of those are reports from people. And if you go and you look at the reliability of eyewitness testimony, you'll find it's the most unreliable evidence presented to in a court of law. Eyewitness testimony is not reliable, and there's a number of reasons for it. Okay, and so you have to eliminate all those, and it's just an impossible thing because most of those reports are just retelling of what happened. There's no attempt to provide explanation on any of those reports, and that's what we need, is an attempt to provide an explanation. You can't just say, I don't know, therefore the supernatural.
I can.
Okay. Congratulations, you haven't convinced us, and I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Talk to you later. Thanks for calling.
Try again. Tell us when you can.
Yeah.